Good evening. I'm Ronald Crutcher, president of the University of Richmond, and I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's Sharp Viewpoint Speaker Series event about fostering friendship and dialogue across difference. While I regret that public health conditions prevent us from gathering in person, I am pleased that our virtual format allows us to reach viewers well beyond the boundaries of our campus. The Sharp series was established in 2011 in honor of Richard L. Sharp, a nationally recognized entrepreneur, to present competing views on topics crucial to our nation and our world. Sharp was a recognized thought leader and an exemplar of personal and professional integrity who served as a mentor to aspiring business and community leaders. Among his many professional roles, Mr. Sharp served as chairman of the board at Circuit City, CarMax, and Crocs Incorporated. Mr. Sharp was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease in late 2010, but continued to demonstrate his values of leading by example and making the world a better place until his death in 2014. The university celebrates its commitment to Mr. Sharp's vision by fostering important dialogues that challenge us to think critically about the many pressing issues of our time. This year, we welcome pairs of thought leaders with opposing views to model thoughtful and substantive dialogue across political and ideological divides. In this bitterly polarized time, when any discussion around race, religion, or politics teeters on the edge of diatribe, it is critically important to provide students with role models who can openly and energetically disagree without acrimony. We've been fortunate to have a robust lineup of speakers this year who can help prepare our students for the challenges that lie ahead and give them information they can take into the classroom, living room, or workplace. In just a moment, I will welcome my colleague, Professor Jessica Flanagan, to introduce tonight's thought leaders. Dr. Flanagan is the Richard L. Morrill Chair in Ethics and Democratic Values and has expertise in leadership, ethics, bioethics, and political philosophy, among other areas. Thank you so much, Dr. Flanagan, for being with us and for moderating an informal conversation with the speakers and university community members earlier today. I encourage our audience to engage with us too by using the #YouAreSharp hashtag on social media. Thank you once again for joining us. Now, I'd like to welcome Dr. Jessica Flanagan.
Thank you, Dr. Crutcher, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to welcome you all to this conversation with Dr. Cornel West and Robert P. George. Dr. Cornel West is professor of the practice of public philosophy in the Divinity School and the Department of African and African American Studies at Harvard University, and the class of 1943 professor of African American Studies emeritus at Princeton. He also taught at Union Theological Seminary and Yale and the University of Paris. Professor West holds more than 20 honorary doctorates. He's written 20 books and has edited 13. Professor West is best known for his classics, Race Matters and Democracy Matters. His memoir is entitled Brother West, Living and Loving Out Loud. Professor West communicates to a vast variety of publics in order to keep alive the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., a legacy of telling the truth and bearing witness to love and justice. Professor Robbie P. George is the McCormick Professor of Jurisprudence and the director of the James Madison Program in American Ideals and Institutions at Princeton University. In addition, he's frequently been a visiting professor at Harvard Law School. Professor George is the recipient of the U.S. Presidential Citizens Medal, the Honorific Medal for the Defense of Human Rights of the Republic of Poland, the Canterbury Medal of the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty, and Princeton University's President's Award for Distinguished Teaching. He holds 21 honorary doctorates, and he's written many books, including the influential Making Men Moral, Civil Liberties and Public Morality, and In Defense of Natural Law, both of which were published by Oxford University Press. His articles have appeared in the Harvard Law Review, the Yale Law Journal, and other prominent scholarly journals of philosophy, political science, religion, and law. In this conversation, Dr. West and Dr. George will discuss their perspectives on liberalism, education, and the value of respect in the presence of political and moral disagreement. Though Dr. West and Dr. George's views reflect very different ends of the ideological spectrum, they are both deeply committed to the values of civic engagement, intellectual humility, and free expression. This conversation will be a fitting end to the year's Sharp Viewpoint series with our president, Dr. Crutcher, as Dr. Crutcher has also promoted these values, which are central to a liberal arts education, throughout his time here at U of R. If time allows, we hope to invite members of the audience to join the conversation by submitting questions through the Zoom Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. And now it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. West and Dr. George on behalf of the university, and to thank you both for virtually visiting our campus community for this conversation tonight. Welcome, Drs. West and Dr. George.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank you, thank you.
So just to begin, just to talk generally to kick off the conversation, I would ask, how would you recommend that people foster and sustain friendships in the presence of deep moral and political disagreement?
Well, first, let me say, Jess, if I could go first, just how honored I am. And I speak for Cornell as well, how honored we are to be at the University of Richmond, a very distinguished institution that is remaining faithful to its liberal arts heritage and liberal arts ideals. And that's something very, very important to Professor West and myself. This is a deep point of commonality, especially the love for humanistic learning, the kind of learning that enriches us intrinsically, that isn't directed solely at learning skills and obtaining information, but deepening our understanding, especially of the most important questions, the great questions of meaning and value, the existential questions that it is in our nature as human beings to wrestle with, that it is for our good as human beings, for our fulfillment to explore, not only individually in the privacy of our own heads, but in dialogue with each other, the dialogue that's modeled for us by Socrates on the streets of Athens, raising very annoying questions for his fellow citizens, and that Plato gives us such a wonderful, rich, deep account of in his dialogues. So we're grateful to you. We're grateful to the University of Richmond for what it represents and for keeping the faith. That faith is being lost at institutions around the country, including those that style themselves and have historically been liberal arts colleges and liberal arts universities. There are many pressures, we can get into them later if people are interested. There are many pressures on liberal arts institutions today, pressures to veer away from those liberal arts ideas, especially from the humanistic side, from the humanities. But it's important that there be some institutions that resist that and stay true to the faith and the importance of the questions that are raised in the humanities. And in exposing students to, if I can quote Matthew Arnold here, the best that has been thought and said by the greatest thinkers in history about the great questions of meaning and value, not only here in the West, but across the globe from all the various traditions. The humanities are about being human. Humans have been wrestling with these great existential questions from their various standpoints in different traditions shaped by different histories, different cultures, and so forth. And all of us have important things to learn from all of those great traditions. Also, Jess, I want to thank you personally for moderating this second exercise of the day for opportunity to meet with students and faculty earlier in the day. And just a special word of gratitude to President Crutcher. What a great man. Great scholar, great academic leader, a musician and musicologist. He's the kind of thing you'd expect, the kind of person you would expect to be leading a university is committed to liberal arts ideals as the University of Richmond. And I wish you luck in finding a worthy successor for a guy like that. So thank you. Now to the substance of your question, if I can begin. Look, the first thing we need to do if we're going to get the benefit of friendship with each other across lines of ideological or political or religious or philosophical or cultural division is we've got to get to know each other as human beings. We can't read each other out of the conversation from the start because we don't agree with something. Or we regard some view that they hold as so far beyond the pale that even though they're willing to defend it with reasons and arguments and do business in the proper currency of intellectual discourse, we're not going to listen, not going to have anything to do with them. We're going to read them out. Well, you're not going to get anywhere that way. You're not going to get the benefit to yourself of even having your views challenged. It's hard, yeah, it's hard, especially when they are deeply held views, cherished views, even identity forming views, the views we identify our very selves with. It's tough to have those challenged, especially by a sharp, intelligent critic. I'm not claiming that's easy. It hurts in some ways. And yet, it's the best thing that we can do for each other. It's the whole point, as Cornel has often said, of a liberal arts education, to unsettle the student learner and the teacher as well. Socrates is willing to be unsettled and not just to unsettle. That's part of the dialectic. It's part of the enterprise. And it's intrinsically and not merely instrumentally valuable. But that's true if and only if the enterprise is directed toward the truth. Whatever divides the interlocutors, the discussion partners, the debating partners, they need to share a commitment to get at the truth. That must be the common goal. And if that's their common goal, then they've got something to build on. They've got something deeply in common that will, in a certain sense, relativize all the things that differ them. They may differ about what the truth is on very, very important issues, but they want to get at the truth, which means they're going to exemplify and to exhibit certain virtues, the virtues you need if you love the truth and want to get to it. And those include intellectual humility, and intellectual humility that's founded on one's recognition of one's own fallibility, and then therefore the need to be challenged, even on the deep, important issues. This is why I love my brother. Well, I'd probably love him anyway because he's so lovable, Cornel. What deepens this friendship, which is more than a friendship, this true brotherhood between the two of us, fraternal bond, is this deep sharing of a commitment to truth and truth seeking, which has given us both our vocations. This is why we do what we do. We don't do it for the money, believe me, it's not that good. We don't do it for status, because you don't get that much status in our society by being a couple of eggheads. You should be an actor or a pop singer or something like that if you want status, or a corporate executive, or a head of a tech firm, or a startup. No, why do we do it? Why have we shaped our entire lives around it? Because of this shared love of the truth. And we both know that to get at it, we need to challenge each other. We need partners who will challenge us and make us think. So our relationship is built on that bond, what we have called in our writings, the bond of truth seeking. Now, by the way, I want to take this opportunity. I did it for a more select group this afternoon, a smaller group this afternoon, but I want to take this opportunity, Cornel, to congratulate my brother on his latest achievement and recognition. That is a Grammy Award with Arturo Farrell for their album, the best, getting the Grammy for the best album of the year in Latin jazz. So as you can see, Cornel is a man of many, many excellences. Excellence in scholarship, excellence in activism, excellence in film, and excellence in music, among others. But at the base of the relationship, at the base of the bond, and there's no reason this can't be the same for any other two people who are serious and committed to the truth, whatever their differences, is that love of truth and that commitment to truth seeking and to following the argument wherever it may lead. Commitment that is absolutely based on a recognition of our own fallibility and the need to be open to truth in the way that you will be if you love truth more than your opinions. If you fall so deeply in love with your opinions that you favor them over truth, then there will simply be a war. There will simply be power. That's all. We're in a Nietzschean world. It's whoever can win. It's whoever can overpower the other guy, either with the force of rhetoric or the force of arms. If we want true bonds, fraternal bonds, bonds of friendship, bonds of civic friendship, there needs to be something more fundamental than our differences. Love of truth. Cornel?
Absolutely. Absolutely, my dear brother. Well, it's always a joy to be in dialogue with you, my brother. I tell you, I have a love for you that is never, ever reducible to politics or in any way flattened out in terms of our disagreements, even when you're wrong and I'm pushing against the wall. When I'm wrong, you push me against the wall, but we stay in contact with each other's humanity. We're able to revel not just in our own brotherhood, but in our families, and your precious mother and father and my mother, and your kids and my kids. We all come together, and that makes a very, very important difference. I want to salute, of course, our dear sister, Jessica's distinguished Professor Flanagan and her powerful work on pharmaceutical freedom and so on. We acknowledge your work having very important impact, even more recent stuff dealing with the sisters who are working and how they have their dignity preserved under very adverse circumstances and so on. And brother Crutcher, and of course we just saw his wife of such grace and dignity, the First Lady of the University of Richmond. Both of them, what a dynamic duo. He and I go all the way back to Berkeley School of Music. And of course, he comes right out of the chocolate side of Cincinnati, Bootsy Collins and others at Mount Zion Baptist Church. So it's always a blessing to set eyes on him. And anytime I come to Richmond, I just acknowledge the towering figures. Dorothy Irene Height, born right here. Randall Robinson, born right here. D'Angelo, artistic genius, born right here. On the vanilla side, Ellen Glasgow in This My Life, that powerful Pulitzer Prize winning novel, born right here in Richmond. And of course, Tom Wolfe, I won't say too much about it, brother Tom, wearing his white suits, the bonfire vanities, but all Richmond. Dwight Hopkins, we can go on and on. Maggie L. Walker, first Black woman, founder of a bank, head of a bank. Why do I say that? Because anytime you talk about liberal arts, you're talking about arete, what the Greeks call arete, excellence, what I would call greatness tied to the biblical criteria. He or she who's greatest among you would be your servant. What is the scope of your compassion? What's the depth of your love? And will that love go beyond simply a love of wisdom, but also be a love of stranger, a love of neighbor? Of course, I'm a Christian, so I'm still trying to love my enemies, but I don't try that on my own. I need a whole lot of grace for that. And sometimes even the grace is not enough, because I'm still got a whole lot of gangster in me. And so I've got to conquer it every day, dying daily, as Paul says in the New Testament. Now, why is this important for what Brother Robbie and I do? What is it? It's crucial because we live in a moment of such spiritual decay and moral decrepitude. And by spiritual decay, what I mean is the shattering of bonds of empathy and sympathy, and therefore the reinforcing of massive distrust and fear of one another. And that can lead toward a despair in terms of trying to sustain high quality relationships. It's not just cross racial lines. It can be Black on Black. It can be white on white. It can be female on female. It can be male on male. It's a human thing in that way. This is what happens in a moment of such spiritual decay. And by moral decrepitude, I mean the relative eclipse of the virtues, not just of faith and hope and love, but of integrity, honesty, decency. I mean, the CD that you talked about that we won this Grammy for about 4 questions about W.B. Du Bois, the 4 questions he raised. How shall integrity face oppression? What does honesty do in the face of deception? What does decency do in the face of insult? How does courage meet brute force? Integrity, honesty, decency. Those are revolutionary forces in a moment of such grimness and such bleakness when it comes to quality life and quality relations with one another, socially, politically, but also in terms of our personal and interpersonal relations, you see. And I know even here at this grand institution at this moment, we've talked about this before, you know, we've got our precious students, I guess most of them chocolate and Black, who are now disassociating at the moment over struggles over the monuments. Ryland and Freeman, and how do you come to terms with this? How do you engage in a robust, honest, candid, but also respectful dialogue, given the vicious legacy of white supremacy that has shaped this whole nation, not just Richmond, even though Richmond's had a whole lot of it, but this whole nation. And how do you accent the best inside of each and every one of us in response to that particular legacy? And it could be male supremacy, whatever evil we're talking about, whatever ideology that loses sight of the humanity of people, that loses sight of their sanctity and their dignity of being made in the image of God. And so each one of these historical moments requires, I think, the kind of thing that Brother Robbie's talking about, which is the virtues at the center, a mature spirituality. And the mark of a mature spirituality is always humility, acknowledgement of fallibility, but also a moral tenacity. See, just because you're humble doesn't mean you're not tenacious. No, not at all. But if you're arrogant and you're so certain of yourself, then you're going to fall in the bitter cup of a self-righteousness that usually leads toward a deep disappointment and despondency, if not despair. And it seems to me that we need people these days of all walks of life, all colors, all genders, all sexual orientations, all national identities, who take very seriously these virtues and recognize just how difficult it is to sustain them, being in the world but not of it, over against the world, over against the dominant orientations of the world. We talked this afternoon about those hounds of hell, the great Howard Thurman, one of the towering spiritual and intellectual figures of the 20th century. The hounds of hell, the greed, the hatred, envy, resentment, those things are always already at work in any historical moment of the human species. And the question becomes, how do we generate the intellectual, moral, spiritual armor to keep track of it and to be able to intervene against it? And we can disagree on strategies. I mean, right now, I'm sure there's debates at the university about strategies and so forth and so on. That debate, sure, it needs to take place. But in the end, you've got to put the virtues at the center. So it can't be just justice. Any justice that's only justice soon degenerates into something less than justice. You've got to be deep love, care, and concern at the center, or justice itself can become an idol. But at the same time, justice is something that is very, very crucial and often a threat to status quo and establishments. Every generation, any form of orthodoxy, any form of dogmatism. How do we engage in critical responses to it? Any form of greed, no matter what color. How do you engage in spiritual and moral responses to it? Any form of callousness and indifference toward the suffering of others, especially the least of these, especially the most weak and vulnerable ones, the poor and elderly and the widows, the fatherless, the motherless, the Black folk, indigenous peoples, poor white brothers and sisters, and so forth. You see. And of course, University of Richmond with its Baptist roots, we'll get into those Baptist roots. I'm a Baptist myself, so I don't come here to trash Baptist. I'm critical of Baptist deeds oftentimes, but I am a die-in-the-wool, Holy Ghost-driven, free, Jesus-loving Baptist from Shiloh Baptist Church. And all the Ivy League education in the world is not going to flush out. Irene West, Clifton West, Reverend Cook, Deacon Hinton, and Sarah Ray, my vacation Bible school teacher. They taught me some things that Harvard and Yale and Princeton know not of, but we won't get into that right now.
Absolutely. Cornel, let me explore a point that you raised, because I think it's a very important one, especially for students. Professor West and I began teaching together, seminars together, about a decade and a half ago. And we've encountered this question, this puzzle, from students across the ideological spectrum. As you can imagine, we draw the complete spectrum. We draw people from the left and from the right and from the center, and then the ones that are just unclassifiable. But they have the same questions, whether they come from the right or the left. How can I be, at the same time, simultaneously, how can I be a person of conviction and a person whose mind is open? How can I be a person of conviction and not be a dogmatist? Now, that's a genuine existential question. People didn't start asking that yesterday or in our generation or in our time. This has always been one of those great questions, those perennial questions that people have wrestled with. And there's no definitive answer to that. All we can do is do our best to sort of shed some light on it. So here's what I think we need to recognize. We need to be persons of conviction. We need to be willing to act for what we believe in. That's true for folks on the left. That's true for folks on the conservative side. That's true for folks in the center. Folks in the center aren't people without beliefs. They just have centrist beliefs. They may be passionately, and they may believe those things passionately, every bit as passionately as someone on the other side, or either of the two sides. But it's good for people to be persons of conviction because that's how we get things done. If we make progress, it's going to be because people of conviction stood up and took chances and gave of themselves, even emptied themselves, made sacrifices, suffered martyrdom. Lincoln, King, so many others. At the same time, close-mindedness, dogmatism, being an ideologue is toxic to the human spirit. It diminishes us, and it places the causes that we should be believing in, especially the cause of truth-seeking, in grave jeopardy. We're not safe, we ourselves are not safe from ourselves if we become ideologues, and others are not safe from us if we become ideologues. So we need to be open, to be willing to be challenged. Now, how do we do that? Well, we human beings naturally wrap our emotions more or less tightly around our convictions. That's the way we're made. And that's a good thing. If it weren't for that, if we had no passion for our causes, if we just had bare beliefs with no emotional oomph to them, nothing would get done. Even the small things of life, getting the kids off to school in the morning and getting to work and so forth, much less the great causes that people have made heroic sacrifices for. And yet we must recognize it's just the human condition that if we wrap our emotions too tightly around our convictions, then we will become dogmatists. Then we will become partisans. Then we will fall into groupthink. We'll want to constantly be pleasing our tribe or our group, and we'll never dissent and we'll never raise questions. And then we're just no good to anybody. So striking that balance correctly is part of the challenge of leading human life. But it's a challenge that we have to meet. And we meet it, I think, if we follow the example of Lincoln. Think of that second inaugural address given on March 5th, I think, 1865, with the end of the war in sight, with the Union victory in sight. Greatest speech, I think, in all of American history, one of the greatest speeches in all of history, greater even than the Gettysburg Address. What does Lincoln say there? Well, one of the things he says is that the war was brought on both the North and the South for the sin of slavery, not just on the South, on the North and the South. And then he says, it's a paradox because both read from the same Bible and worship the same God. And then he allows himself to say, it's difficult for me to understand how anyone who prays to a just God would want to take the bread from the sweat of another man's brow. But having then taken that shot at slavery in the South and the Southern slaveholders and the justifiers of slavery, Lincoln says, but let us judge not, lest we be judged. He had conviction. He was willing to fight a war. He knew it would be bloody. And it was. Enormous death toll, enormous sacrifice. That's conviction. And at the same time, humility. Let us judge not, lest we be judged. And then what does he say? In the conclusion, those famous words, with malice toward none, with charity for all. Now those words should shame us today. They should embarrass us in our current state of polarization and partisanship, with people unwilling to shake each other's hands, unwilling to listen to each other's arguments because they disagree, treating each other as enemies to be destroyed, not as civic friends who happen to disagree about some very, very important things. We should do what Lincoln says. We should follow his example. It should be with charity for all, with malice toward none. That's really the only way forward. This experiment, this fragile experiment in Republican government and ordered liberty cannot survive extreme polarization. It almost collapsed in 1800. It very, very nearly ended in 1861. And we have no guarantee, no great civilization has any guarantee that it will survive. It's up to each new generation to exemplify the virtues, including Newtonian conviction and humility, without which the Republican experiment cannot be sustained.
Absolutely. And you know, Brother Robbie, it's always a challenge to each and every one of us to acknowledge that Abraham Lincoln only had 1 year of formal education.
Yeah.
A Bible in one pocket and Shakespeare in the other. But he becomes an exemplar of wrestling with what it means to be human, knowing that our English word human comes from the Latin humando, burial. He knew he was on the way to burial, wrestling with his depression, wrestling with his grimness, coming to terms with his own formation in a white supremacist society, continually trying to grow, acknowledging he was wrong about certain views about sending Black folk to Haiti and other parts of, no, I was wrong about that. Now I believe we can actually create a multiracial democracy. But he's saying what he means and means what he says. It's like Malcolm X. Malcolm X, of course, no formal education after junior high, but he's continually growing. So he can, who's ever for justice, I'm for them. I'm a human being, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Black man trying to be free, who love these Black people and spills over to chocolate, to vanilla sides and red sides and yellow sides and so forth. Continually trying to undergo maturation inseparable from the cultivation of a critical sensibility of what the great Alfred North Whitehead would call noble discontent. Yeah. Critical discontent. That's what he talks about in the Adventures of Ideas. That becomes a benchmark of a liberal education or any quality education. We're not trying to indoctrinate anybody. People have to land where they land. That's the anthem of Black folk. Lift every voice, not lift every echo. We don't want extensions of echo chambers. We want voices. You can't be a D'Angelo. You can't be an Aretha Franklin. You can't be a Curtis Mayfield. Dropped out of school in 8th grade, but at least 2 colleges went through him because he found his voice. Can't be a Coltrane. You can't be a Louis Armstrong. You had to find your voice through unbelievable discipline, master of craft, of technique, but most importantly, being willing to surrender to yourself, surrender of yourself to something greater than you.
Kenosis, Cornel.
Kenosis, that emptying of the self, that donating of the self, that sacrificing of the self to a calling. I mean, one way of talking about this is to talk about the ways in which callings have been reduced to careers.
Yeah.
And vocations, those 2 great essays of Max Weber of 1917 and 1919, science as vocation, politics as vocation, fundamental conceptions, beruf, conceptions of yourself that link you to something bigger than yourself. That's not just your career, that's not just your job. It cuts deeper than that, but the market is beginning to take over. Everything's commodified. Everybody's commodified. I got my brand. Don't tell me about your brand. I want to know what your cause is. What are you willing to live and die for? I don't want to know what your PR strategy is to help your career. I tell that to students all the time. They look at me like I done lost my mind. They do, Brother West, you living in a different world. No, you living in the wrong world. You living in the market-driven world. That ain't the real world. Wait till your mama dies and see how that mark is going to equip you to deal with that catastrophe. That's where you find out what's real. That's the reality you cannot not know in the language of Henry James. You're going to have to come to terms with it sooner or later. And catastrophe is on its way to your house. Sooner or later, I don't care what part of town you live in. And you better be prepared. You better be ready. You better put on that armor, the 6th chapter of Ephesians. You better put it on and make sure that it's going to get you through. Because that little superficial stuff is going to be like cotton candy. You're going to bite down and there's no there. What Gertrude Stein said about Oakland. She's wrong about Oakland, no. There's no there. You got to have some substance in your soul, substance in your heart and your mind, and learn how to disagree like a jazz musician. Always listening, cultivate the capacity of receptivity. Me and Brother Robbie go at it. I'm listening to my brother, and I say, plausible but not persuasive. I want to hear more, Brother Robbie. I'm listening. Brother West, I'm listening. I don't think your argument is as persuasive as you think it is either. Wonderful. And after a couple of hours, we go have a drink. He has his wine as a Catholic brother, and I have some cognac in the name of Jesus. And I know some of my fellow Baptists don't like to hear that, but that's the kind of Baptist I am. I'm gonna have some cognac, but the important thing is that we're reveling in each other's humanity, and last but not least, we finding joy. Because so much of American culture is a joyless quest for insatiable pleasures. You get all the titillation in the world, and your soul is still empty. And your life is still vacuous, you see. Because the market can provide all the stimulation and titillation. Oh my God, they got all gazillion different things. But in the end, what is the source of your joy? That's Brother Smallwood. He got an answer to the source of his joy. Richard Smallwood, y'all know Richard Smallwood, one of the great composers of contemporary gospel music, you see. And that joy is a higher level. It's a different register. It's a different way of engaging the world. We're losing that.
Cornel, culture shape people. All of us are shaped by the culture that we exist in, we're brought up in, but the shaping isn't just during childhood. It shapes us through
Absolutely.
And we have to have a critical perspective on it. And that's true at any time, in any place. Now, in our own time and place, you and I have been, both of us have been teaching students now for more than 35 years, right? Brilliant.
I got 44. I'm so much older than you, my brother.
You've been at it for 44. Okay.
I'm so much older than you.
These are wonderful kids and brilliant, and they're good kids. Very rarely have I had a kid that I was worried about strictly speaking, from the moral point of view, that I thought was malevolent, a bad kid, right? That's very rare. You almost never see that. They want to be nice people. They want to be good people. They want to be decent people. They treat each other decently. It may slip now and then. We all do. But here's my problem. Here's my concern. Even the best of our young people, they're being shaped by the culture to direct their attention toward secondary and derivative and merely instrumental values. Getting ahead, getting wealth, getting a better job, professional standing, social status, influence, power, prestige, being somebody, celebrity. And those things aren't bad in themselves. You can do good things with those things. If you have money, you can use that money for very good causes. You have influence, you can use that influence for good causes. Somebody's going to have influence. I'd rather good people have the influence than bad people have the influence. So those aren't bad in themselves. But when the focus is so narrowly on those things, from kindergarten all the way through, when what they're picking up from the parents and the coaches and the pastors even and the teachers is directing them toward achievement in that sense, they lose track of what is primary and non-derivative and intrinsically good and not merely instrumentally valuable. Faith, family, friendship, honesty, integrity. They understand in their heads that those are the more important things. But what are you spending your time focusing on? Getting those good grades in order to get into that law school or graduate school, in order to get that top job in a big law firm or at a big corporation, to have that social standing, to have the big house, to be somebody important and somebody influential. We got to get our values right. Here again, you're talking about Lincoln. Wrestling with the depression, which he did, you're absolutely right. And then wrestling with the feeling of the responsibility, that great responsibility for the carnage of the war. He knows he could have let the South go, avoided the war, but he felt he couldn't as a matter of moral principle, as a matter of basic constitutional justice. But he's feeling the weight of responsibility. Beyond that, he's got a difficult marriage. He's married into a slaveholding family from Kentucky. His best friend throughout his life, Joshua Fry Speed, is a slaveholder and a defender of slavery. He's in a complicated position. It's very difficult. He's trying to wrestle with the culture that he's been born into. And we can all fall into errors. And this is something that we got to understand. And we have to bring this home to our young people. We may be very, very confident that we're right about the important things. Oh yeah, we're confident. Yep. But then let's think back. Even in our own time, within 100 or 110 years, the eugenics movement. The eugenics movement was embraced not by the stupid people, not by the uneducated people, not by the marginal people. It was embraced by the powerful, the wealthy, the most highly educated, the progressive, the people with influence and power at the top, the professors, the business leadership, the leaders of the great foundations and corporations. They thought they were doing the right thing. They were absolutely convinced of it. They thought people who refused to go along were religious nuts or hillbillies or hicks or rubes. And yet we look back and we say, how could they have done that? How could they have made that mistake? We now see eugenics as a profound evil. After Hitler, we saw. And yet at the time, it was the smart, the educated, the affluent, the powerful, the wealthy. People very much like ourselves. People went to fancy schools. The University of Richmond, the Princetons, the Harvards, the Swarthmores, the Oberlins, and so forth. People at the top of their game. People who are the big earners. We need to learn from them. We are them. We're in the same position. What mistakes are we making? And I don't care whether you're a conservative or you're on the left. You should be asking yourself that question. You should be worrying. What do I believe that maybe is like eugenics? What the smart people believed, what the well-educated people believed, but turned out to be profoundly wrong. That's the self-critical spirit, the Socratic spirit that we need. Now that spirit's also consistent with the prophetic spirit. Cornel exemplifies this in his life. That combination of the Socratic self-critical spirit and the prophetic activist spirit. He's willing to act for justice, call out the evils as he sees them. He's got, as Lincoln said, if I can quote that speech again, firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Cornel's got that. But he holds them together in balance. You let either one of those go, you're in trouble.
That's so very important, though, brother. And this is true for all of us at our best. You know, we begin with use Christian language, sinner that I am.
Yes, that's right.
See, I was a gangster before I met Jesus, and now I'm a redeemed sinner with gangster proclivities. So it's a perennial process. Remember what Dorothy Day wrote for the eulogy of Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. learned how to die daily. She just leave, drop the mic and the pen. She gone. Just learn how to die daily. And what we tell our students when they come in our class, 15 years now, you come in this class to learn how to die.
He does. He tells them that. That's exactly.
I thought I was getting a grade, Professor George and West. I'm just trying to read a little Plato and Toni Morrison. And no, you're going to learn how to die here. It's a lifelong process of critically examining your assumptions and presuppositions. And when you let them go, that's a form of death, because there is no life without death. There's no growth and development and maturation without death. That rebirth inside of you, intellectually, morally, spiritually, and all the way to your grave. They say, I see what you're saying now. So join the caravan. And that's what we tell all our students. And what I would say to my precious Black students, many of them maybe not here tonight, but their spirits are here, is that whatever strategies they come up with, always be connected to the best of the tradition of Black people. And that tradition is one in which for 400 years we have been hated, but we've taught the world so much about how to love. Turn on a little Love Supreme, a Coltrane. Turn on What's Going On to Marvin Gaye. Read a love-soaked essay by James Baldwin. Go back and read Beloved by Toni Morrison. Read Love and The Need of Love by Stevie Wonder. These are love warriors. Yes, we've been terrorized for 400 years. We terrorized back and we opted for black versions of the Ku Klux Klan? No. No, at our best, we've produced freedom fighters for everybody, even when they don't like us, because it's right, because it's moral, because it has a spiritual content to it. We've been traumatized for 400 years. Absolutely right. But at our best, we produce wounded healers, not wounded hurters. So given all the wounds and scars we have, yes, they're real. They're ugly. The vicious legacy of white supremacy is operating, but it doesn't have the last word in terms of love and freedom and healing in the history, the best of the history of Black folk. So I want to tell my folk who may be disaffiliated at the moment that remain tied to putting at the center of whatever you do, that love, truth, and stranger and neighbor, that love of beauty, the freedom for everybody, not just on one side of town. And in the end, trying to heal. What I learned in Shiloh Baptist Church, if the kingdom of God is within you, then everywhere you go, you ought to leave a little heaven behind. How much heaven are you leaving behind? With your grin, with your touch, with your book, with your painting, with your song, with your relation, with your interaction. How much heaven are you leaving behind? And that heaven's going to unsettle folk because we live in a hellish world. So you're not going to be accepted. And if you are fully accepted, the establishment's patting you on the back too much, you ought to check yourself.
When
You ought to check yourself. You can't follow Jesus into the temple, running out the money changers and be on Pontius Pilate's payroll. It's not going to work. You got to have attention. Nothing wrong with Pontius Pilate's humanity, but he's in a position where he can seduce you and you can sell your soul. I know I'm going on too long, but you jump right on in, though, man.
Well, just one point I wanted to make there, Cornel. When I was a graduate student studying philosophy in the early 1980s, it's about the same time you were, it was popular in some philosophical circles to believe, or at least to say, that the real danger to the spirit of liberty was the belief in truth. Do you remember this, Cornel? People would say, well, you know, we shouldn't embrace the idea of truth, because if we believe in truth, then we're not going to respect other people's liberty.
Right.
Well, that was wrong. In fact, in some ways, it was the very reverse of the truth. It's probably the lack of belief in truth that's more dangerous to liberty, because in truth, everything's just power. And there's no reason that can be given to. But lay that aside. I think the element of truth in that article, in that argument, in that view, it was mistaken. But the element of truth in it shouldn't have been directed at the idea that truth is the danger. What's the danger is certitude that I have.
Yes. Absolutely.
That dogmatism. You know, it's the failure to recognize our own fallibilities. So especially when we are out there fighting for a cause we really believe in. And again, it doesn't matter. It can be the cause that the students are fighting for down there with the statues and the naming and so forth. It can be the pro-life cause. It can be environmental causes. Whatever it can be a good cause. It can be a great cause. It can be a true cause. But if we get so certain of our own view that we're unwilling to be challenged, we then do become a threat to liberty. That certitude, that dogmatism will make us a threat to our neighbors and to ourselves. It's a point I made earlier, because it shuts down thinking. It's toxic to thought. The argument needs to be going on not just between the interlocutors, but in our own heads. All the time, we need to be challenging ourselves. We mustn't be too certain. Yes, have conviction. Yes, act on conviction. Go out there, march, demonstrate, do what you think needs to be done. But the spirit in which you do it is important. This is what Professor West is saying to students right now. the spirit in which you do it has got to be an open-minded spirit. It's got to be a spirit that's willing to listen. It's got to be a loving.
That's right. That's right.
Sure of itself. It was the great Judge Learned Hand, the greatest American jurist never to serve on the Supreme Court, who said the spirit of liberty is a spirit that's not too sure it's right. And that's certainly true of the spirit of truth seeking as well. So if we question ourselves and if we allow others to question us, that doesn't mean we are being unfaithful to truth, not at all. Doesn't mean that we've given up belief in truth, not at all, much less justice or goodness or beauty. It means that we love truth enough to be worried that we will lose it out of love for our own opinions.
Absolutely.
We'll close ourselves off to truth. There's
Absolutely.
something that closes us off to truth as completely and locks it down as solidly as dogma.
You know, it reminds me of the great letter that Henry James wrote to Robert Louis Stevenson, January the 12th, 1901, that no theory is kind to us that cheats us of seeing.
Mhm.
And we can even expand on that. No morality is kind to us that cheats us of empathizing with others, to put ourselves in their shoes, try to live within their world, to get out of our world. That's what our great art does at its best. And I would say especially no religion is kind to us that cheats us of loving others in the form of protecting, respecting, and correcting. So love in that sense is a virtue. It's not a mood.
Yeah, not a feeling.
It's not a feeling. You see, we're not talking about some sadomasochistic love of the Ku Klux Klan because they lynch and pressure black people. No, that's sick. That's pathological. But there's classical Christian hatred, which is hating the sin and still trying to stay in contact with the humanity of the sinner. Now you see, that is gut bucket folk wisdom coming out of the Christian tradition, both in not just the United States, but from around the world.
And this is what takes us back to the eugenics question again. As I think
that's right.
We need to remember, no matter how firmly convinced we are in the righteousness of our beliefs, maybe we're the sinner.
That's exactly right.
I mean, the folks who embrace the brilliant, many cases brilliant academics, intellectuals, thought leaders, activists, corporate titans, foundation leaders who embraced eugenics, they didn't do it out of malice. They weren't malicious people. They weren't trying to hurt people. They thought they were helping humanity. They understood their goal was a great humanitarian goal. And those who corrected them out of a sense of love. It wasn't because they hated them, but they disagreed. And so they said, no, we can't go down that path.
Absolutely. I hope we're going to have some time, though, Sister Jessica, for questions, though, because we don't want to just talk. And we go with the spirit anyway. We don't worry about calendar time. That's kind of brothers we are.
This is what happens when the two of us get together, even
absolutely.
Virtually.
Yeah, exactly.
While listening, I've been watching questions come in, and I'm just going to try to lump together a bunch of them thematically and have you sort of respond to it. So, Dr. West, you say, like, I want to know what your cause is. And a lot of the questions coming in have been just about that. Some of the risks or hazards of political engagement. So some questions have addressed your own political engagement and activism, both Dr. West and Dr. George, or our own universities' participation in civic engagement, and also the political implications of our own history and symbols related to that. And then other questions have been asking about how to prompt more civic engagement. And I just wonder, to sort of lump them all together, we know that taking a political stand or being committed to a political cause under the model of King or Lincoln, who you've been talking about, is really epistemically dangerous. And it can corrupt our friendships, but it can also distort our ability to see the truth. And you bring up the model of Socrates, and Socrates says in the Apology, I don't want to be involved in politics, and I never wanted to be involved in politics because I am a disciple of the truth. And you could, I think, read parts of the Christian tradition this way too, of being in the world but not of it. So what is the case for Lincoln over Socrates? What is the case for taking these risks? And both of you have been politically involved. How do you hold yourself accountable while still engaging in political activism and engagement? And how would you respond to people who have concerns about your own political engagement while you're also purporting to be committed to the pursuit of truth in these ways?
Powerful and wonderful question. That's why Brother Robbie's going to take it on first, I hope. But I'll follow them, brother. Is that all right? Is that all right?
How generous of you.
Is that all right? That's good. That's good.
Cornel and I have a very, very dear friend now in his 90s, one of the great philosophers of our time. His name is Harry Frankfurt. Professor Frankfurt is a critic. He's a dear friend of ours, but he's a critic of ours too.
Oh, yeah.
It's on precisely this point. We are scholars who are politically active. Now, we realize that's a challenge. We've read Plato. We know Socrates' view. And we're a couple of disciples of Socrates. Jesus first, but Socrates too.
That's right.
We're a couple of disciples. So we know what the argument is, and we know that might be right. And so we do what we do, going out into the world, advocating causes in fear and trembling. Because here's what Harry says, Professor Frankfurt says, we need to be single-mindedly dedicated to the truth and beholden to no party or interest or group or cause of any kind. And he puts it very starkly and colorfully. He says, we are the monks. The monks. We don't belong in the world. We belong in the monastery of the academy, doing our truth seeking. Now, what's behind that worry? It's that when you identify with a cause, your thinking can be colored because you're concerned fundamentally with strategy and getting that cause vindicated in the public deliberation and decision making. And you lose sight of that critical perspective. You lose sight of what really matters, getting at the truth of things. And what's more, once you enter the fray, you join a team. And the team expects the players to be team players. And let me tell you something that Cornel West and Robbie George can tell you all about. And that is what happens to you when you dissent, refuse to go along with what the team says we're doing now, or what we're saying now. And if you don't back them up, and if you don't get in there and say, oh yeah, I'm with you 100%, if you criticize a leader of your side, you are going to be sent to the outer darkness. You are a betrayer. You are Judas Iscariot. You are the worst kind of person. And that's tough for us human beings to take because we naturally desire the affirmation of the group. And groups are formed around shared convictions, shared values. And you want that affirmation. Who wants to be exiled? But if you're a true truth seeker, I can tell you, I don't care whether you're left or right. If you're a truth seeker, left doesn't have monopoly, right doesn't have monopoly on the truth. You're a true truth seeker. There are going to be times, Cornel and I can tell you all about them, when you just are going to have to be an outsider. And they're going to be calling you names and kicking you in the public media, and it's going to be really bad. But there's where push comes to shove, Jess. There's where the question is, how do you prioritize the values? Politics first or truth first? You can do both. Cornel and I are committed to the idea you can do both. We could be wrong. Socrates and Harry Frankfurt could be right. But we believe, at least for now, you can do both. But you can't say both are equal. Truth first, politics second. Truth relativizes everything else. If it's a conflict between the cause, the team, the group, the tribe, and the truth, you got to go with the truth, and you got to just take the consequences, whatever they are. Excommunication, exile, whatever. Cornell's done this.
Absolutely. No, I mean, we could tell a story about the president of Princeton who used to say, the two professors who got the most vicious letters and death threats and vicious attacks were Brother Robbie and Brother West. And we view that as a compliment. It's just that these death threats can be serious things. And we both experienced that.
And guess what? They don't always come from the other side. So, Cornel, when Cornel criticized President Obama, oh man, did he get the heat.
Oh, absolutely. And I told Black folk, I'm not loving Black poor working people or Black people in general, or anybody, in order for them to love me back. I love them because they're worthy of being loved. That's what it means to be a follower of a Palestinian Jew named Jesus. It's not no quid pro quo affair, transactional. I love you, you love me. No, not at all. There is something that is internally rewarding in finding joy and being of service to the least of these, period. So if Obama is bailing out Wall Street rather than Main Street, if he's dropping drones on precious kids in Somalia and nobody wants to say a mumbling word, I'm going to be morally consistent. I'm not in it for popularity. I'm in it for integrity. And to be morally consistent, or what Jane Austen would call constancy. Are you able to have a constancy that will get you in trouble in every narrow dogmatic camp? That's a compliment if you live through it. If you're able to live through it.
Let me add something else from our experience. And I got the same experience on the conservative, on the Republican.
Absolutely.
That Cornel has had. I mean, when I've spoken out for the rights of Muslims, for example, my goodness, I get all sorts of heat. Or criticizing Donald Trump or whatever it is. But let me tell you another danger. And if Professor Frankfurt were here, he would reinforce this. He'd emphasize this. When you gain some standing in relation to a cause that you're speaking out for, and when you have a prestigious position as a Harvard professor, a Princeton professor, what have you, you're a valuable asset to your team. They like having you give the imprimatur, the elite certification to the cause or to the argument. And as a result of that, you're going to get applauded. You're going to get cheered. Now, let me tell you something. This is directed directly to you young people out there, students who are listening. I mean, everybody, but especially students, please listen to me on this. If you don't believe anything else I say, believe this. Applause is a drug. It is more powerful and it is more addictive than heroin or cocaine. Once you get some of it, you want more. It's just the nature of the thing. We love it. We love to be cheered. We love to be applauded. It feels good. It's great. And then the prospect of losing it by dissenting, by criticizing Obama, by criticizing Trump or Republicans, Democrats, or whatever it is, you begin to really get shakes about that. Because you don't want to lose that. It's too good. It makes you feel too good. But you got to do it. So if you're looking out at the world and you see people, political people or social activists or public intellectuals who are always being applauded by the people on their side of the ideological or political spectrum, you should be very worried about them. They probably don't have truth and politics in the right relation. They've got them like this or even like this. Truth isn't up here, relativizing politics down here.
Well,
And we tend to want to downplay it. Martin Luther King Jr. had 72% disapproval in America, 51% disapproval by Black people when he died because of his critique of what was happening in Vietnam. A Vietnamese baby had exactly the same value as a white baby, a brown baby, a Black baby for Martin Luther King Jr. He's bringing poor people together like William Barber and Sister Thea Harris right now in the Poor People Campaign. That was not popular, even within his own group. But he did it because he was trying to be true to the best of his fallible ability. We know how fallible Martin was. He had a lot of faults and foibles. He was a human being like everybody else, but he was also a brother who was true to his calling. And when you're true to your calling, you're not only going to get in what John Lewis called good trouble, but you're going to wade in the water. When you wade in that water, we could have the president pull out his cello and just play. Wade in the water. you're going to find trouble there. Just like Nahum, God is going to be encountered in the whirlwind, in the storm, in the trouble, in the water. And yet what happens? Just like Jacob in the 32nd chapter of Genesis, he emerges with new vision, new energy, with wounds and a new name, a God wrestler. That is the great prophetic legacy of Jerusalem that we intertwine with the Socratic legacy of Athens and the blues legacy of a hated people who keep dishing out love warriors, generation after generation after generation.
Well, thank you so much. Now that Dr. George has said that applause is a drug, I'm a little bit reluctant to tell you about all of the people telling me that they're applauding this conversation in the Q&A, and I'm sure that they're applauding it at
That's a good
home.
point. We don't mind a little bit. We don't mind a little bit now. We don't mind a little bit. Is that right? Is that right, Brother Robbie? We don't mind a little bit.
As you mentioned, Dr. West, I'm a believer in pharmaceutical freedom, so I don't see as much of a problem with that. But thank you again, both of you, for engaging in this discussion with us this evening. And thank you so much to the audience for joining us. We'll now turn to Dr. Crutcher for his concluding remarks.
Surely. Well, what can I say? I mean, this afternoon I said, hallelujah. And I say it again this evening. You are just fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. George and Dr. West, for gracing us with your presence and you can see that you've worked together for many years. And I hope that our students in particular were listening to you this evening. You provided them a lot of wisdom that will serve them well. I also want to thank our audience as well for tuning in this evening. This event actually concludes our 2020-21 Sharp series, and it's also my last time hosting the Sharp series as president of the university. I've been really grateful to share these learning opportunities with you over the past several years, and I personally look forward to joining you for future events as a fellow audience member. So thank you to all of you. Have a good night, Dr. West and Dr. George. We're so grateful to you for being with us.
Thank you.
We thank you out there, brother. We thank you, though, brother.
God bless you.
Take care. And Dr. Flanagan, thank you also.
Yeah, Jess, thank you.
Yeah, Sister Jessica.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care, everyone.